we appreciate them for supporting this show as well as they do year in, year out. All right. We got the regular panel. We got Jimmy Himes. We got Isiah Victor. We got Mike Strange. We got Chuck Cavaleris, Brittany Nada, Bob Hodge join us a little bit later. Not a great night for Tennessee on Friday. We said last week that looking at the SEC RPI rankings, the Memphis game was almost a must-win in a lot of ways for Tennessee to get into an NCAA tournament, unless they just absolutely go nuts down the back half against the SEC schedule. They lose 85-80. Somehow they managed 80 points, and we'll discuss that, but they did take the loss 85-80. I'll start with you, Isiah. Your thoughts on Tennessee's performance the other night against Memphis?
I think they played well for a stretch of the game, but they had that lapse, offensively that you've been seeing from time to time, and it really cost them. I think Memphis took it to us, drove us. They're very athletic, very skilled individual players. They didn't do anything really special as far as X and O wise, but they, like I said, it almost looked like they were just passing it around and took turns going one-on-one, and it was effective for them. And I think the zone slowed us down enough until, of course, McCray got hot, and then you see Richardson, he kind of filled in some, and it kind of opened the game up. But other than that, I just think they were superior individual basketball players.
Mike?
Yeah, we've seen the scoring troubles before for a half or for a whole game, and but their defense has allowed them to hang in there, and it wasn't there. Memphis shot 65% the first half, so that's what happens when you don't keep it ugly. Then the second half, you saw a Tennessee team that was behind by 20 points and came out and had a 52-point second half, which equals the biggest half of the Conzo Martin era. And I was a little bit surprised that afterward, in the post-game, Conzo said, well, I'm fine with that, getting up down the floor. I like the guys being aggressive, going to the rim, and it just makes you wonder what's the best way for this team to go about it going into the SEC now.
Yeah, you've almost got, if you stay with the defense, you can win some games, not lose to the best teams. But if you go the offensive route, just pushing it up and down the court, your defense goes to pot, it seems. Memphis did have a couple of guys there. Tennessee climbed back into it in that second half. Memphis certainly had a couple of guys that were banging down the threes that kept Tennessee at arm's length. I want to show everyone here their shooting percentages. I thought this was interesting. When Tennessee is winning, shoot okay. You see they're 47%, 32% from three. But, boy, when they're losing, they're not just bad, they're very, very bad. 33% three-point shooting in losses. 23% in losses, 33% in wins in the three-point percentage. And you see over there the field goal percentage drops to 32 in losses. So 15% worse when you're losing games, and they're 8-4, so that's your 4 losses. Jimmy, my question, is this a bad offense? Is this a situation where the offense simply doesn't fit the players? Or is this yet another year where Tennessee just lacks shooters?
I think they lack shooters. And the problem is they've got guys that are inconsistent or erratic. But McCray, to me, is a guy that's a pretty good offensive weapon. He's on a pretty good stretch right now. Josh Richardson has improved his game a lot offensively. But then you got Golden, who's made, one of his last 16. McBee has not had a good year shooting, and that's his forte. He has to hit, in my opinion, three-pointers to be an effective part of that team, and he's not been doing that. And so I think that they're too erratic. Does the offense, do the players suit the offense or so forth? I don't know, but it still gets back to this to me. That Tennessee misses Maimon probably more than I thought they would. I think he'd make a huge difference. He'd make a difference in Stokes' game. He'd probably get you more open three-point looks. And I just think having him not in the lineup has hurt this offense to where this offense, to me, without him, is going to continue to be inconsistent and struggle to score points. Now, I know Memphis, they scored a lot, but to me, they'll have difficulty scoring in the 60s a lot without Maimon.
Yeah, this team, what do you guys think of that question? The bad offense, players don't fit the offense, or just lack of shooting?
I honestly think it's a combination of all of those things. And I think it's the type of players that you've been recruiting that maybe they're more athletic, but we've talked about this before, but fundamentally sound basketball skills they seem to be lacking. Who are your go-to players on this team? If you had an inbounds play and you needed to score, who are you going to try and get the ball to? What are you going to set up? There's just not many options there. So, I think it's a combination of all of those.
I think Tennessee might have too many one-dimensional players. I think it would suit them better if they had more guys that could do more things, good defense, good passers, good shooters. But I think they got too many. And I'm watching Memphis, and look at what Memphis is bringing off the bench.
Yeah.
I agree with Isiah earlier. Memphis is a better team with better players, I thought.
Yeah, and they played better on Friday, that's for sure. I haven't seen enough of them to say that that's, a trait other than a state that they were in. But at the same time, all that matters is the game that you play. And they did play better than us the other day. Now, I've heard people say, well, they usually don't shoot that well. They shot the lights out. Well, it's a rivalry game. And I don't think everybody totally understood the magnitude of that. I think they did. But it seems like we were kind of flat. That just really doesn't happen in those type of games, and it really can't. That desperation that they had once we went down 20, they have to be able to create that for the whole entire game. Now, it's not the easiest thing to do. As far as the offense goes, I really think I guess Coach Martin, he's only been here, this is his second year, so he doesn't have the players that he didn't recruit all these players. And I guess when he first got here, it was in the summertime, maybe he didn't even have
yeah, but I also think you could wonder if you stress defense so much that your offense and what you're trying to accomplish on offense has suffered. And I think that's a very valid question.
You ignored it is what you're getting at.
Or you haven't spent nearly enough. If it's like 80% of you're spending your time on defense, what are you spending on offense in practice?
Well, technically you got to be spending 50-50 because you're defending somebody who's playing offense. But I see what you're getting at. And the thing is, you had that under Bruce Pearl as well. Remember, there's this mist that's flown in that, boy, they were great offensively. They were high scoring. But when they played a team that wouldn't turn the ball over, how many times did we bring out the numbers and show if they don't get turnovers and junk baskets, they don't score? So you had that. We talked about that same thing, this flex offense, and Dane would sit here and say, well, it's a good offense. You just have to have players that run it. I think it gets back to more of the players than it does the system. And I still wonder where this team would be if they just had one guy. And I know you want to have multi-dimensional players. Right. I mean, hey, if you can get 5 guys that can do it all,
or perfect. At least 3.
But if you had one guy that could shoot, if you had one zone buster that you could trust as a shooter, and you don't have one, you do not have one.
And see,
at this point.
And plus Trey Golden, now aren't we wondering about a shoulder injury there? Skylar McBee has been potted with an elbow injury. I mean, it's more than just a Maiman injury that seems to be piling up.
Well, here's the thing. Let me very quickly, I'll give you this one. Conzo Martin said there will be an announcement tomorrow whether or not Jerron Maiman comes back or tries to come back or doesn't. If you're Tennessee and he's amenable to taking a medical red shirt, is there any reason to try and bring him back at this point?
Well, I mean, he's not going to be 100%. So how close to that are you going to be able to get quality minutes? Or, I mean, what have you got? And I'm saying you got to be looking much more at the medical red shirt.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't. To me, it would be a waste to try and bring him back at this point because as you've discussed on radio and as we've discussed here, you're not going to be ready immediately. And you're going to have to come back and get yourself into game shape and everything else. Are you talking about February? Or mid-February? So what's the point?
Well, and you're almost thinking somebody on that bench, somebody that maybe hasn't been contributing as much, that's who needs to step up.
Would you use a red shirt on him or just
I would, unless he and his family said absolutely they're not coming back next year no matter what.
All righty. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Tennessee-Memphis series. Earlier this week, Josh Pastner said it was dead, kaput. And then his athletic director said, well, not so fast. We'll discuss that. And can Tennessee flank their way into Memphis right around the Tigers? We'll discuss. Come on back. Welcome back in. This segment of our show brought to you by Tennova Healthcare. For the best orthopedic care in East Tennessee, trust Tennova. From broken bones to pulled muscles to all-out joint replacements, the Tennova team can diagnose your injury or your energy, and they can fix it with as little hassle as possible. Tennova Healthcare, I trust them. I hope you will trust them as well. All right. Guys, as I said going out of the last segment, early last week, Josh Pastner came out and said the UT-Memphis series was dead. As long as he was the coach and his AD was on the same page with him, as long as he was the coach, there would be no more Tennessee-Memphis games. Then his athletic director came out and said, well, it's an important game, that Tennessee game. And Dave Hart said, yeah, we've been talking for a couple weeks. So this whole Tennessee-Memphis series has been thrown back into the mix thanks to the Big East mess. I think that's forced Memphis' hand, and the athletic director out there came back and said that was the issue, and he should have told Josh Pastner that he was discussing the contract with Tennessee. Yes, he should have. But my question is, how important is that series for Tennessee's recruiting efforts in Memphis? I mean, Tennessee isn't exactly reeling them in from the Memphis area, playing them every other year.
I think
is it that big of a deal?
Well, I think it's important to give them a chance. I think it hurts you a little bit not being able to get in there. And when I think of Memphis, I think Memphis area. Mm-hmm. But getting Stokes, I think, is going to help them. Now, they ended up not getting anybody directly from Memphis. Robert Hubbs is from the area.
He plays AAU ball with Memphis, I believe.
Yeah, to me, I agree with you. That's Memphis in my opinion.
Yeah, so I think it can help you to get into Memphis. Is it going to make the difference in a player two? Maybe, and one or two players could make a difference in where you're headed.
But I don't know that Robert Hubbs came here because they had that.
I don't either.
That's the thing. It can't hurt, obviously. I'm not saying if you can play him in Memphis, you do. I just don't know that it's, oh my gosh, you have to be there.
What about recruiting in football playing in Memphis? I mean, I think that's as big a factor too.
What about?
What is Josh Pastner afraid of? If you want to beat somebody in recruiting, you beat them when you play them. You don't run away and hide. All he's doing is keeping that seat warm until Bruce Pearl can come back and coach the Tigers.
A lot of people out there right now are saying, "What do you mean Memphis?"
Yeah.
A lot of people are already saying they want Bruce Pearl back in Knoxville. If you read the message boards.
And Tuscaloosa, throw that in too. I've heard that.
They're already done with Anthony Grant down there.
Yeah.
Good thing those guys make $5 million a year because they only get a year. When you look at the Memphis series, Isiah, how important do you think it is to keep that thing going?
I think it's very important. It's our biggest non-conference in-state rival, and it was a game on the schedule at the beginning of the year that we always look forward to. And it was, we
had
Memphis players.
Did you play them every year when you were there? Or was it?
I'm not sure. Strange.
Yes, I believe you did.
You've blocked the Jerry Green years out of your mind, haven't you?
I'm trying to remember our record. It's been a lot.
I got to say, he's the first person on this show that has a memory worse than mine.
No, I believe they played them every year.
His is natural, though. All right. Let me ask you this, guys. Memphis has a right of first refusal. University of Memphis has a right of first refusal, reportedly, on any game that's somebody tries to line up in the FedEx Forum. But here's the thing: that thing is owned by the city of Memphis. Whether the University of Memphis has a right of first refusal or not, if, for example, Tennessee and Arkansas, two teams who desperately want to get into Memphis, who Pastner has said, I don't want to let them into Memphis, I don't want to let people come in and get our recruits. If Tennessee and Arkansas, who will play every year in the SEC, if they went to the city officials in Memphis and you had, let's say, Pilot money or Walmart money on the Arkansas side sponsoring this thing, I think that the University of Memphis would be up against the wall to say, nope, we're not taking any extra ESPN coverage for the city. All you business owners down on Beale Street, we're not going to let people come in here and have a big game and a big rivalry. I don't think Memphis could block it. So my question is, can you just flank the University of Memphis? If they balk and say we're not going to play and you can't force their hand with the football deal, which is what Tennessee's traditionally done, do you just try and line up somebody else in Memphis? I mean, there's nothing that says you have to play the Tigers. If you can get around their potential block, and I think you can if there's enough money on the table. Do you try and go into Memphis anyway?
Of course you do. I love that idea.
You try.
I would already have that in motion.
Could you go back to the pyramid and push all the Bass sports equipment out of the way and play a game in there?
Bob wouldn't like that if he pushed all the Bass Pro Sports.
The bottom line on this series is good for the state of Tennessee. It's good for basketball in this state, and it's bigger than Josh Pastner.
And let me hear the word nobody said yet. It's good for the fans.
Right.
And Isiah said the players and the fans really care about this game.
Well, it's interesting. Pastner isn't the first one to try and keep this thing out of it. I mean, Calipari said, let's play it in Nashville and call it the Governor's Cup, because he didn't want anybody coming into Memphis either. He would much rather go put his show in Nashville, trying to get some guys out of there. What do you think about the idea of playing somebody else in Memphis if you can't get the Tigers?
I saw where you wrote it on Mr. SEC, and I thought that's a really good idea.
With Arkansas,
to try to have Tennessee and Arkansas. If Memphis is going to try to keep you from coming in there. And I like the Tennessee-Memphis series, not just the recruiting part of it, but just the whole thing, the players, the fans. Look at the attendance the other night at Thompson Bowling Arena. It was almost 20,000. So, but I think that's a great idea, and I think Memphis, if you did that and you lined up and you're talking to ESPN, they'd say, okay, wait a minute now. All right, if there's going to be a game in Memphis, we want to be playing in it. Yeah. We don't want Tennessee and Arkansas, Tennessee and Ole Miss, Arkansas, Ole Miss. I like that idea.
Yeah, I think the Tennessee-Arkansas thing makes a lot of sense because you can, you could do that every year and make that your rivalry, and you're satisfying those West Tennessee fans.
Right.
And at the same time, you're only giving up a home game every other year. When you're playing Arkansas, it's your home game's out there this year, and it's their home game that's out there the next year, if you do it every year.
And I thought Dane Bradshaw made a really good point the other day when he was talking about, he said in Memphis, how many, Pastor wants to tell you it's Memphis, Louisville. How many Louisville hats do you see in Memphis? How many Louisville sweatshirts? But you see orange all the time in Memphis. And the Memphis people care more about Tennessee than they care about Louisville. So Pastor can talk all this rivalry stuff all he wants. The folks there would rather see Tennessee and Memphis instead of Memphis and Louisville.
All right. Well, you'll be back with us a little bit later, Isiah. We'll break down Tennessee's remaining basketball schedule, look at their NCAA tournament chances. But when we come back, Bob Hodge, Brittany Nauta join us. Quick hitter questions for the panel. Come on back on the Enrichment Sports Source. Welcome back into the Enrichment Sports Source, rejoined here by Jimmy Himes, Bob Hodge, Isiah Victor. Chuck Cavaleris is over at the big board. But first, I want to show you the RPI rankings from across the SEC right now, just to set the table for where Tennessee is. Florida, 16th in the nation. You see their records to the right, but that's their RPI going into yesterday. So it was changed a little bit yesterday, but Florida 16, Missouri 34, LSU 53, Texas A&M 55, Kentucky 59, Ole Miss 63, Alabama 64. Tennessee, 77th. Then you got Arkansas, Vanderbilt, 4 SEC schools below the 200 mark. Georgia, South Carolina, Auburn, Mississippi State. The point is, a lot of those teams, all they can do is hurt you when you play them. If you lose to them, it's an absolute nail in the coffin. If you beat them, it doesn't do you much good. When you look at the SEC overall, as of the middle of this week, the league was ranked 9th among all conferences in terms of RPI. That's why we said last week that Memphis game was going to be so important, because you really don't have a lot of ways to help yourself moving forward. But I do want to look over here at the big board right now, Chuck, and there you see Tennessee's schedule in the SEC, all right, and it starts over there on Ole Miss, go down that column, and it ends up with Missouri on the other side. But my first question, let's just do this kind of quick. Do you think Tennessee's going to win a road game in the league this year?
Yes.
And if so, where?
I think the 2 good opportunities are South Carolina and Vanderbilt, which I don't think are very good, and Georgia and Auburn.
Yep.
How many of those do you think